My girlfriend told me I was insecure for not wanting her to sleep in the same bed as her male best friend. I said, "You're right," broke up with her, and started dating the best friend's ex. All right, Reddit, buckle up because this one's a doozy. My ex-girlfriend genuinely thought I was the problem for not wanting her to share a bed with another dude, called me insecure, controlling, and jealous. So I agreed with her, packed my stuff, and somehow ended up dating the one person who could expose exactly how full of garbage she was. Life's funny that way. I'm Cole, 29, and I work as a civil engineer for a firm in North Carolina. Been here since college because I actually like humid summers and sweet tea, and also because my job pays well and I've got a nice little townhouse that's almost paid off. Nothing flashy, but it's mine. Got a truck that runs, a dog named Bruno, who thinks he's a lapdog despite being 80 pounds. And until about 8 months ago, I had a girlfriend named Megan, who I thought was the love of my life. Spoiler alert, she wasn't. My job's pretty straightforward. I design drainage systems, review construction plans, and make sure buildings don't collapse because someone wanted to save money on foundation work. Not glamorous, but it pays well, and I'm good at it. My boss keeps hinting about a promotion to senior engineer, which would mean more money and less time in the field dealing with contractors who think they know more than the guy with the actual degree. The townhouse was a steal. Previous owner had to relocate fast for work and practically gave it away. 2 bedrooms, small backyard perfect for Bruno, garage where I keep my workout equipment and tools. I've been slowly upgrading things over the years. New kitchen counters, hardwood floors in the living room, built-in shelves in the office. The kind of stuff that makes you feel like an actual adult instead of a guy pretending to have his life together. Bruno came into my life about 4 years ago when my sister's friend found him wandering the streets looking like he hadn't eaten in weeks. She couldn't keep him in her apartment, so I volunteered temporarily. Temporary turned into permanent the moment that dog curled up on my feet and fell asleep. He's been my shadow ever since, following me from room to room, like he's afraid I'll disappear if he looks away too long. Let me paint you a picture of how this whole disaster started. Megan and I met at a friend's wedding 3 years ago. She was a bridesmaid, I was one of the groomsmen, and we spent the entire reception talking in the corner while everyone else did the electric slide. She was a dental hygienist, had this infectious laugh, and seemed genuinely impressed that I owned furniture that didn't come from a college dorm room clearance sale. The wedding was for my college roommate Brad and his now wife Michelle. Big outdoor ceremony at this vineyard about 2 hours from the city. I'd known Brad since freshman year when we got paired as roommates and bonded over our shared hatred of 8 a.m. classes. Good dude. Terrible taste in music, but good dude. Megan was Michelle's coworker. They worked at the same dental practice downtown, and Michelle had asked her to be a bridesmaid because they'd gotten close over the year. I noticed her during the ceremony, mostly because she kept making faces at Michelle to try to make her laugh during the vows. Seemed like someone with a sense of humor. Reception rolled around and somehow we ended up at the same table. Started talking about random stuff. Favorite movies, worst first dates, whether pineapple belongs on pizza. She had this way of making everything feel easy, like we'd known each other for years instead of hours. By the time the DJ started playing Bruno Mars, I'd already asked for her number and she'd already given it. We started dating immediately after that wedding. Things moved fast, but it felt right, you know? First date was coffee that turned into dinner, that turned into walking around downtown until midnight, because neither of us wanted the night to end. Second date was a hiking trip with Bruno, and she didn't complain once about the mud or the bugs. Third date she came over and we made dinner together while Bruno watched hopefully from his spot in the corner. Within 6 months, she basically lived at my place, even though she kept her apartment for appearances because her parents were traditional. Whatever, I didn't mind. I liked having her around. Bruno liked her too, which in my book was the ultimate seal of approval. That dog has excellent judgment about people. Usually. Her apartment was this tiny studio near downtown where she worked. Barely room for a bed and a couch, no room for a dog, and definitely no room for 2 people to live comfortably. She started spending more and more nights at my place until the studio was basically just a storage unit she paid rent on. Made more sense for her to just be at my townhouse, where there was actual space to breathe. For almost 3 years, things were solid. We talked about getting married, having kids, the whole 9 yards. I even started looking at rings around our 2-year anniversary, though I never pulled the trigger because something always felt slightly off. Nothing I could pinpoint. Just this gut feeling that I kept ignoring because everything looked perfect on paper. Her parents loved me. Her dad Frank was this gruff contractor who'd built half the houses in their neighborhood, and he respected that I worked with my hands even if mine was more design than labor. Her mom, Patricia, treated me like a son, always making extra food when we visited, and asking about my job like she actually cared about drainage calculation. They kept dropping hints about wedding dates and grandkids, and Megan would laugh and say we were taking things slow. My parents felt the same way about Megan. My mom thought she was delightful, always commented on how polite and put together she was. My dad liked that she actually talked to him about sports instead of just nodding politely like previous girlfriends had done. My sister thought she was a little too perfect, but kept that opinion mostly to herself until later. Then came Damon. Damon was Megan's best friend from high school. They'd grown up on the same street, went to prom as friends, stayed in touch through college even though he moved to Atlanta for some finance job. According to Megan, they were like siblings, purely platonic. Nothing romantic had ever happened between them, and nothing ever would. I'd heard about Damon for years but never actually met him. He was just this abstract figure in her stories, someone she'd text occasionally or FaceTime during holidays. I had zero problems with it because why would I? Everyone's got old friends. I've got buddies from high school I still talk to, and if any of them moved back to town, I'd be excited too. The stories about Damon were always positive. How he helped her study for finals in high school. How he drove 2 hours to pick her up when her car broke down sophomore year of college. How he always remembered her birthday and sent funny cards. He sounded like a good guy, the kind of friend everyone wishes they had. Then Damon announced he was moving back to North Carolina. His company opened a branch in Charlotte, about 40 minutes from where we lived, and he'd been offered a senior position. Something about managing accounts for major clients. The kind of job that sounds impressive at dinner parties, but nobody really understands what it actually involves. Megan was ecstatic when she told me the news. Like bouncing off the walls excited, talking about how they could finally hang out again like the old days. She called me at work to tell me. Couldn't even wait until I got home. Her voice was all high-pitched and happy, going on about how she'd missed him so much and how great it would be to have her best friend nearby again. I smiled and said, "That's awesome, babe." Genuinely happy for her, because I had no reason not to be. I was happy for her. Genuinely. Having your childhood best friend move back to the area seemed like a good thing. Plus, I figured I'd finally get to meet this legendary Damon character, and maybe gain a new buddy in the process. Always good to expand the friend group. The first time I met him was at some Italian restaurant Megan picked out. She'd been planning this dinner for weeks, wanting everything to be perfect for when her two favorite people finally met. I showed up in my nice jeans and a button-down, ready to make a good impression on the guy who'd been her friend longer than I'd known her. Damon rolled up 20 minutes late in a BMW that screamed mid-level finance bro trying too hard. He was about my height but thinner, wore clothes that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment, and had this way of looking at you like he was calculating your net worth and finding you lacking. His handshake was the kind where they squeeze too hard to prove something. He barely shook my hand before sliding into the booth next to Megan instead of across from her. First red flag, but I brushed it off. Old friends sit next to each other. No big deal. Dinner was weird. Every story Megan told somehow involved Damon. Every joke was an inside reference I didn't get. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, Damon would redirect it back to something from their shared past. I felt like a third wheel at my own girlfriend's dinner. I tried to be engaging. Asked about his job, his apartment search, his plans for the weekend. He gave me these short answers that didn't invite follow-up, then immediately turned back to Megan to tell another story about something that happened in high school. I sat there eating my pasta primavera and wondering if this was what the rest of my relationship was going to look like. But whatever. First meetings are awkward. I gave it time. Except time didn't make things better. It made them worse. Suddenly, Damon was everywhere. Megan wanted him to come to our game nights. Megan wanted him to join us for Sunday brunch. Megan wanted to go help him decorate his new apartment and spent an entire Saturday there while I was at work. She'd come home talking about his amazing view and his fancy kitchen and how he was such a natural decorator. The game nights were the worst. We'd have friends over for board games and food, something we'd been doing for years. And suddenly Damon was a permanent fixture. He'd show up late, make comments about how the games we played were too basic, and spend half the night on his phone while the rest of us actually participated. But Megan would light up whenever he arrived. Like the party didn't start until he walked through the door. My buddy Travis noticed it before I wanted to admit it to myself. Pulled me aside during one of those game nights while Megan and Damon were having some private conversation in my kitchen. "Dude," Travis said with this concerned look, "you seeing what I'm seeing?" I shrugged. "They're just catching up. Old friends." Travis gave me the look, the one that says I'm being an idiot, but he's too polite to say it directly. "Sure, man. Whatever you say." The real problem started about 2 months after Damon moved back. Megan came home one Thursday night and casually mentioned that she and Damon were planning a weekend trip to Asheville together, just the two of them, to check out some music festival. I looked up from the pasta I was making. "Excuse me, what?" She looked at me like I'd asked her to explain basic math. It's just a weekend trip, Cole. We used to do this kind of stuff all the time in high school. You're being weird about it. I wasn't being weird about it. I was being a normal person who found it strange that his girlfriend wanted to spend a weekend alone with another guy. But apparently, that made me insecure. I asked if I could come along. Suddenly, there weren't enough tickets. I asked if her friend Rachel wanted to go and make it a group thing. Megan said that would be awkward because Rachel didn't know Damon that well. Every solution I offered got shot down with some excuse that didn't quite make sense. The excuses were creative. I'll give her that. The hotel only had one room left. Damon's car only seats two comfortably for long trips. The festival was sold out except for the 2 tickets they'd already bought. It was like she'd anticipated every possible objection and preloaded a response. Fine. I decided to trust her. She went to Asheville, sent me a few pictures, came back Sunday night acting totally normal. I asked how it went, and she said it was fun, and that was pretty much the end of the discussion. The pictures were mostly of scenery, mountains, the music stage from a distance, one selfie of her and Damon at a coffee shop that I stared at way longer than I should have, trying to read something into the way they were standing. I told myself I was being paranoid. She'd never given me a reason not to trust her, but something had shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it, but she seemed different after that trip. More distant, more attached to her phone, more likely to step outside to take calls that were supposedly from work. The texts that used to be out in the open were now angled away from me, like she didn't want me seeing the screen. Small things started adding up. She stopped leaving her phone on the counter when she showered. She changed her password and claimed it was for security. She got defensive when I asked casual questions about her day. Every conversation felt like there was a subtext I wasn't supposed to notice. Then the sleeping arrangement conversation happened. Megan's parents were renewing their vows for their 30th anniversary. Big party, whole family coming in from out of state. They'd rented this lodge up in the mountains that could sleep like 30 people. Megan was obviously invited, and so was I, as her long-term boyfriend, who her parents actually liked. She'd been talking about this event for months. How meaningful it was that her parents were still together, after 30 years. How she hoped we'd do something similar someday. How important it was that I be there to meet all her extended family and show them we were serious. When we were going over the sleeping arrangements, Megan mentioned casually that she'd be sharing a room with Damon. I literally stopped mid-sentence. Come again? She explained it like I was a child. The lodge had limited rooms. Family members got priority. Since Damon was basically family and I was technically not a blood relative, it made more sense for her and Damon to share a room while I bunked with her cousin Brandon. Her tone was so matter-of-fact, like she was explaining why water is wet. Just basic logic that any reasonable person would understand and accept without question. The sky is blue, grass is green, and obviously your girlfriend should share a bed with another man at family events. I just stared at her. You want to share a bed with another man while I sleep in a different room. It's not a big deal, Cole. It's Damon. He's like my brother. We've shared beds plenty of times growing up. You're being really insecure about this. There it was. The magic word. Insecure. The word hung in the air between us like a challenge, like she'd played a trump card that was supposed to end the discussion. How dare you have feelings about this situation that make me uncomfortable? The real problem here is your emotions, not my actions. I took a breath, tried to be calm, tried to be rational. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with that arrangement. That, as her boyfriend of nearly 3 years, I thought it was reasonable to expect we'd share a room at a family event. That asking to not have your girlfriend sleep in the same bed as another man wasn't controlling or jealous. It was basic relationship boundary. I kept my voice steady. Didn't raise it, didn't accuse, just stated facts. This makes me uncomfortable. I would like us to share a room. This is a reasonable request from someone in a committed relationship. She exploded, accused me of not trusting her, said I was trying to isolate her from her friends, called me possessive and controlling, and said she was tired of walking on eggshells around my fragile masculinity. All because I didn't want her sharing a bed with Damon. The transformation was instant. 1 second she was my girlfriend explaining sleeping arrangements, the next she was a stranger screaming at me about what a terrible person I was. Every perceived slight from our entire relationship came pouring out like she'd been keeping a list. The time I asked who she was texting. The time I suggested maybe she spent too much time with Damon. The time I looked at her phone and she caught me. I let her rant for a good 5 minutes. Just stood there with my arms crossed while she unloaded every accusation she could think of. When she finally ran out of steam and stood there breathing heavily with tears in her eyes, I said the only thing that made sense in that moment. You're right. I am insecure. I'm so insecure that I don't want to be in a relationship where my girlfriend thinks sleeping with another man is normal. So let's fix that. She looked confused. Fix what? This. Us. I'm done. The words came out calm and clear. No anger, no emotion, just a decision I'd apparently already made somewhere in the back of my mind while she was screaming at me. The switch had flipped. I was no longer trying to salvage anything. I was just stating facts. She literally laughed. You're breaking up with me because I want to share a room with my best friend? I'm breaking up with you because you think I'm the problem for having a problem with that. You've been putting Damon first for months and I've been making excuses for it. But this is where I draw the line. What followed was about an hour of her cycling through every manipulation tactic in the book. She cried. She apologized. She said she'd tell her parents we needed our own room. She accused me of overreacting. She threatened to leave and never come back. She begged me to calm down and think about this rationally. The crying came first. Deep, heaving sobs about how she couldn't believe I was doing this. How I was throwing away everything we'd built over something so stupid. Then the apology. She didn't mean to call me insecure. She was just stressed about the party and it came out wrong. Then the bargaining. Okay, we can share a room. She'd talk to her parents. Damon could room with Brandon instead. Problem solved. Why was I still upset? She was fixing it. Then the anger again. Fine. If I wanted to be unreasonable, she'd leave. She didn't need this. She didn't need someone who couldn't handle her having friends. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then stopped and turned around like she was waiting for me to chase her. I didn't move. I stayed calm the whole time. Just kept packing her stuff into boxes while she spiraled. Her books from the shelf, her extra clothes from the closet, the toiletries from the bathroom. Bruno watched from his bed with his head tilted, probably confused about why I was touching stuff that smelled like her. Finally, she hit me with the classic, "You're going to regret this. You'll never find someone who loves you like I do. Maybe. But at least I won't find someone who gaslights me about basic boundaries either. Doors that way." She left. Bruno didn't even get up from his bed to say goodbye, which I took as validation of my life choices. Good boy knew what was up. The next few weeks were rough, not gonna lie. 3 years is a long time to be with someone. Even when you know the breakup was right, there's still an adjustment period. My buddy Travis came over most nights to help me eat pizza and watch action movies. We'd sit on the couch with Bruno between us and trash talk Megan while pretending we were totally fine. Travis had been through his own bad breakup a couple years back, so he knew exactly what I needed. No advice, no platitudes, just company and distraction. We rewatched the entire Fast and Furious franchise. We played video games until 2 a.m. We went to the gym together and lifted until my muscles screamed. Work helped too. Threw myself into projects that needed attention, stayed late reviewing plans, volunteered for site visits that nobody else wanted. My boss noticed the extra effort and started talking more seriously about that promotion. Silver linings. What I wasn't expecting was the message from a girl named Whitney. It came through Instagram about 3 weeks after the breakup. I didn't recognize the name at first, but when I clicked on her profile, I realized she looked vaguely familiar. Couldn't place where I'd seen her before. Brown hair, green eyes, picture of her with a golden retriever on a beach. Her message was simple. Hey, I know this is random, but I think we should talk. I used to date Damon and I have some information you might want to hear. Normally I'd ignore something like this. Sounded like drama I didn't need, but something made me respond. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that she was really pretty and I was newly single. Maybe it was the fact that she mentioned Damon specifically, and I wanted answers about what exactly had been going on. I typed back, "I'm listening." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day. Neutral territory, public place. Just in case this was some weird setup or she turned out to be crazy. Travis thought I was nuts for going. What if she's working with them? What if it's a trap? I told him he watched too many movies. Whitney showed up looking nervous but determined. She was about my age, wore jeans and a casual sweater, and had these green eyes that made it hard to focus on what she was saying at first. She ordered a black coffee, sat down across from me, and started talking. Turns out Whitney and Damon had dated for 2 years while he was in Atlanta. She'd moved there to be with him, gave up her apartment and her job in Raleigh, basically built her whole life around this guy. They'd talked about getting married. She thought they were solid. She'd been a veterinary technician in Raleigh, working at a clinic she loved with coworkers who felt like family. When Damon suggested she move to Atlanta to be with him, she'd been hesitant at first, but he'd been so convincing. Said they couldn't build a future if they were always living in different cities. Said he wanted to come home to her every night. Said he was ready to be serious. So she moved, found a new job, made new friends, started planning a future that revolved around being Damon's partner. Then Megan came to visit. According to Whitney, she noticed something off immediately when Megan arrived for a long weekend visit. The way Damon looked at her. The inside jokes. The casual touches that seemed too familiar. Whitney brushed it off at first because Damon swore they were just friends. Childhood best friends. Practically siblings. Sound familiar? The visit was supposed to be 3 days. Megan had flown in for some kind of conference and was staying at Damon's apartment because hotels were expensive and they were such good friends. Whitney had offered to take time off work to show Megan around the city. Damon said that wasn't necessary, that he had it covered. Whitney watched them together that weekend. The way Megan would touch Damon's arm when she talked, the way they'd finish each other's sentences, the way they'd have entire conversations with just looks, leaving Whitney out completely. She told herself it was normal for old friends. She told herself she was being paranoid. About a month after that visit, Whitney found texts on Damon's phone. Nothing explicit, but definitely not the kind of texts you send your platonic friend. Pet names, flirty comments about missing each other, plans for when they could finally be together without anyone getting in the way. When she confronted Damon, he turned it around on her, called her crazy, said she was reading into things, accused her of being jealous and insecure, and unable to handle him having female friends. The gaslighting was textbook, Whitney said, stirring her coffee. Made me think I was the problem, that I was paranoid and possessive, that I was sabotaging our relationship with my trust issues. She believed him, apologized for going through his phone, tried to be more understanding, tried to be the cool girlfriend who didn't freak out about her boyfriend's female friends. 6 months later, Damon announced he was moving back to North Carolina, said it was for work, said it had nothing to do with Megan. Whitney offered to move with him. He said no, said they needed space, said long distance would be good for them. Whitney's voice got quiet when she talked about that part. How she'd begged him to let her come, how she'd offered to find a new job, make new friends again, start over in a new city, how he'd gotten irritated and said she was being clingy and he needed room to breathe. They broke up a week later, and she never heard from him again, until she saw on Instagram that he'd moved to Charlotte, right near where Megan lived. What a coincidence. I sat there processing all of this while my coffee went cold. Whitney was watching me with this mixture of sympathy and vindication, like she'd been waiting months to tell someone this story, and finally found someone who'd believe her. So you think they were together the whole time? I asked. Whitney shook her head. I don't think they were physical while we were dating. But emotionally? Absolutely. Megan was always his real priority. I was just keeping the seat warm until he could get back to her. That hit different, because that's exactly what I'd been to Megan. A seat warmer. A placeholder boyfriend who served a purpose until Damon could step back into the picture. 3 years of my life building toward a future that she was never actually planning to share with me. Whitney and I talked for 3 hours that day, compared timelines, matched up stories, realized that Damon and Megan had been playing a long game that neither of us saw coming. By the time we left that coffee shop, I had a pretty clear picture of what had really been going on. The timelines synced up perfectly. When Megan started acting distant, that matched when Damon started pulling away from Whitney. When Damon announced his move to Charlotte, Megan had suddenly become very interested in our future and whether I was serious about us, like she was locking me in just in case her other option fell through. But here's the thing about Whitney. She wasn't just a source of information. She was actually really cool. She was smart and funny and had this dry sense of humor that matched mine perfectly. She'd been through something similar and understood exactly why I was hurt without me having to explain it. She didn't tell me I was overreacting or being too sensitive. She just nodded and said, yeah, that tracks. She had a rescue dog named Biscuit, who apparently got along great with Bruno, which she mentioned casually, like it wasn't a big deal. She showed me pictures on her phone, golden retriever mix, big dopey smile, tongue hanging out of his mouth in every shot. We exchanged numbers for future information sharing. That turned into texting about random stuff, memes about dogs, complaints about work, random thoughts at midnight that didn't need a response but felt good to share with someone who got it. That turned into meeting for coffee again. Then dinner at a taco place she liked. Then a hiking trip with both dogs where Biscuit and Bruno spent the entire time chasing each other around like idiots while we walked behind them laughing. About 2 months after that first coffee meeting, Whitney and I made it official. Nothing dramatic, no big announcement, just a natural progression from 2 people bonding over shared trauma to 2 people actually liking each other as humans. She came over for dinner one night, and we were watching some movie neither of us was really paying attention to, and I just asked her, "Are we doing this? Like, officially?" She smiled and said, "I thought we already were." And that was that. My friends thought it was hilarious. Travis nearly choked on his pizza when I told him, "You're dating your ex's boyfriend's ex? That's like some telenovela garbage, dude." I love it. Whitney's friends had a similar reaction. Apparently, there was a group chat dedicated entirely to updates on the situation, which I found both flattering and slightly terrifying. Whitney showed me some of the messages, and they were rooting for us like we were characters in a show they were watching. Word got back to Megan fast. Within a week of us posting a picture together, my phone started blowing up. First came the text from mutual friends fishing for information. Hey man, heard you're seeing someone new. What's the story? Then came the passive-aggressive Instagram story post from Megan about how some people will believe anything and how fake people always find each other. Then came the direct contact. Her first text was almost polite. Hey, I heard you're seeing Whitney. Just wanted to let you know she's a compulsive liar and you shouldn't believe anything she says about me or Damon. I showed Whitney the message. She laughed so hard she snorted. Yeah, I'm the liar. That's rich coming from the girl who told her boyfriend she and Damon were like siblings while probably planning their wedding. I didn't respond to Megan, just kept living my life. That made her escalate. Then came the late night calls. I'd wake up to missed calls at 2 a.m. No voicemails, just Megan's name lighting up my phone screen. I blocked her number. She called from Damon's phone. I blocked that too. She made a new Instagram account just to message me. Finally, I broke my silence with one simple response. I've got nothing to say to you. Stop contacting me. Whitney got a message from Damon about a week later. First time he'd reached out since their breakup over a year ago. The message was dripping with fake concern. Hey, just wanted to check in and make sure you're okay. I heard you're seeing Megan's ex and I'm a little worried about you. Cole can be really manipulative and I'd hate to see you get hurt. If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you. Whitney screenshotted it and sent it to me with the caption, "The audacity of this man." We laughed about it, but underneath the humor, there was something satisfying about seeing them squirm. They'd spent so long manipulating both of us, playing these games behind our backs, and now the two people they'd hurt had found each other and were actually happy. From what I heard through the grapevine, Megan and Damon's relationship wasn't going great. Turns out when you build a relationship on lies and manipulation, it's hard to trust each other. Megan was constantly worried Damon was doing to her what he did to Whitney. Damon was frustrated that Megan kept tabs on his every move. They fought constantly, broke up, and got back together multiple times, and generally made each other miserable. Mutual friends would mention it casually. Heard Megan and Damon are fighting again? Apparently, she found some texts he didn't want her to see. He says she's being paranoid. Sound familiar? Meanwhile, Whitney and I were doing great. Bruno and Biscuit became best friends, which meant most weekends involved hiking trips or beach days with two extremely happy dogs. Whitney started teaching me about animals since she worked at the vet clinic, and I'd come home with random facts about dog nutrition or how to tell if your pet is anxious. Turned out my approach to feeding Bruno was all wrong, and she helped me switch him to a better diet that had him acting like a puppy again. Her parents loved me. Drove up to meet them about 3 months in, nervous as anything, and her dad immediately wanted to show me his workshop and talk about tools for 2 hours. Her mom made enough food to feed an army and kept asking about my job like she actually cared about drainage systems. Good people. The kind who raised their daughter right, and it showed. My parents loved her. My mom kept calling her a breath of fresh air after Megan. My dad said she seemed like someone with a good head on her shoulders. My sister, who'd never really liked Megan but kept it quiet, pulled me aside and said, "This one's a keeper." Everything just clicked in a way that my relationship with Megan never had. Then came the confrontation. Whitney and I were at this local farmer's market on a Saturday morning, grabbing vegetables and walking around with our dogs, when I spotted them across the crowd. Megan and Damon, walking toward us like it was some kind of ambush. I felt Whitney tense up beside me. I put my hand on her back. It's fine. We've got nothing to hide. They approached us with this weird energy, like they couldn't decide if they wanted to fight or pretend everything was normal. Megan had lost weight and looked tired, dark circles under her eyes that makeup wasn't quite covering. Damon looked exactly the same, still with that smug expression that made me want to punch him. Cole, Whitney. Megan's voice was tight. What a coincidence. Whitney smiled sweetly. Is it though? You've been stalking Cole's location on Snapchat for months. I figured you'd show up eventually. Megan's face went red. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Whitney turned to Damon. Hey Damon, still gaslighting women about your emotional affairs? Or did you finally admit the truth? Damon's jaw tightened. You need to move on, Whitney. This obsession isn't healthy. I actually laughed out loud at that. Obsession? She literally hadn't thought about you in months until you slid into her DMs pretending to be concerned. That was rich, by the way. Really convincing. Damon stepped forward like he wanted to get in my face. You stole my girlfriend. I didn't steal anyone. Whitney made her own choice, just like Megan made hers. Funny how that works when people actually get to make informed decisions instead of being lied to. Megan grabbed Damon's arm. Let's just go. This isn't worth it. But Damon wasn't done. He had this need to have the last word, like every insecure man who'd spent his whole life pretending to be more than he was. You two deserve each other, he said with a sneer. A paranoid liar and a controlling jerk. Perfect match. Whitney stepped forward before I could respond. Actually, we do deserve each other. We deserve people who don't manipulate and gaslight and treat their partners like placeholders. So thanks, I guess. If you two hadn't been so awful, we never would have found each other. She grabbed my hand and we walked away, leaving them standing there in the middle of the farmer's market, looking like they'd just been slapped. Bruno and Biscuit trotted alongside us like nothing had happened, more interested in the smell of fresh bread from a nearby stall. We didn't talk about it much on the drive home, just put on some music and let the dogs hang their heads out the windows while the scenery rolled by. When we got back to my place, Whitney went straight to the kitchen and started making lunch like it was any other Saturday. "You okay?" I asked from the doorway. She shrugged. "Yeah, actually. I thought that would feel worse, seeing him again. But honestly, he just looked kind of pathetic, like he's already running out of people to manipulate." I walked over and kissed her forehead. "That's because you've got better things to focus on now." She smiled. "Yeah, like figuring out whose turn it is to do dishes." Travis called me that night after hearing about the confrontation through the grapevine. Apparently, someone at the farmer's market knew someone who knew someone, and the whole thing had spread through our social circle like wildfire. "Dude," Travis said, barely containing his laughter. "I heard Whitney absolutely destroyed them, like verbally demolished. Is that true?" "Pretty much. She handled it better than I would have." "Man, you really found a good one, didn't you?" Yeah, I did. That was about 4 months ago. Whitney and I moved in together last month, found a place with a big backyard for the dogs and enough space for both of us to have our own areas. She turned the spare bedroom into a craft room for her jewelry-making hobby. I set up a home office where I can work remotely on days when I don't need to be at job sites. We talk about the future sometimes. Marriage, kids, the whole thing. The moving process was actually pretty smooth. We found this 3-bedroom ranch on the edge of town with a fenced yard that made both dogs lose their minds with excitement. First day we moved in, Bruno and Biscuit spent 3 hours doing laps around the property like they'd won the lottery. Whitney and I sat on the back porch with boxes still piled up in the kitchen, watching them run and laughing about how absurd our situation was. Her parents drove down to help us move. Her dad spent the whole weekend making sure everything was level and properly installed while her mom organized our kitchen cabinets better than we ever could have done ourselves. My parents came the following weekend with a housewarming gift and my mom's famous lasagna. Everyone got along. Everyone was happy. It felt like the start of something real. About 2 months ago, Megan and Damon finally broke up for good. Apparently, Megan caught him texting another girl, some old friend from college who he swore was just a friend. She finally experienced what Whitney and I had been trying to tell her all along. She tried reaching out to me one more time after the breakup, a long message about how she finally understood what she'd lost. I read it, typed out, "I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not interested. I've moved on. Take care." Blocked her number and went back to cooking dinner with Whitney. Last week, Travis forwarded me a screenshot from Megan's Facebook. She'd moved back in with her parents, posted some vague status about starting over and finding herself. The comments were full of supportive messages from people who had no idea what she'd actually done. Travis sent a follow-up text. "Karma really did its job on this one, huh?" Yeah, it did. Whitney came up behind me while I was reading the messages and wrapped her arms around my waist. "What are you looking at?" I showed her the screenshot. She read it, shrugged, and went back to chopping vegetables for dinner. "Huh. Anyway, Biscuit needs his walk after we eat. Your turn tonight." Bruno and Biscuit are currently passed out on the couch after a long morning at the dog park. Whitney's humming some song I don't recognize while she sets the table. Someone told me this would make a good Reddit post, so here we are.